In Shakespeare's England, there were things called weather diaries. They were full of folk predictions to talk about how much rain had fallen, what kind of wind was blowing, whether a river had overflowed, and all of this information was kept in a book. But does that mean that they had the ability to predict the weather like a forecast in Shakespeare's lifetime? Let's find out right now on That Shakespeare Life. In the 16th century, before satellite and Doppler radar, Elizabethans relied on nature's signs and centuries old folklore to predict the weather. Weather diaries recorded patterns of wind, animal behavior, and even joint pain to forecast coming storms. These diaries helped farmers, travelers, and even actors plan their routes around the country and gave playwrights metaphors that still fill up Shakespeare's plays. To get the inside scoop on how weather diaries worked in Shakespeare's lifetime, I sat down with Martin Rowley, historian of early modern meteorology, and here's what he had to say. Hello, Martin. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Cassidy. It's lovely to speak to you.
Who was it during Shakespeare's lifetime that kept weather diaries?
Oh, well, now we're very interested. First of all, not weather diaries as you or I might understand them, or indeed as I keep one still to this day. And I'm well into my 70s now, and I've been keeping them since I was an early teenager. So unfortunately, we haven't got nicely organized weather diaries day by day. And one of the main reasons for that is because we haven't got instrumentation. We haven't got the thermometers, we haven't got barometers. Thermometers, of course, to measure temperature. We haven't got barometers to measure air pressure. We haven't got hygrometers to measure relative humidity. And even rain gauges weren't really standardized. So there was no real push for people to set up a regime, if you like, of day by day weather recording. But it doesn't mean to say, of course, we don't know what the weather was like. And we have to turn to other sources. And they're fantastic sources. But broadly speaking, they're grouped into three types. What I call the estate managers and the royal records. And I'll go through each in turn and try and briefly describe what each will tell us. Second category would be seafarers. And the third category would be the country clergy. Now, back to the estate managers, let me give you an example. Let's imagine where I live now, the Earls of Salisbury owned vast tracts of land. And of course, the Earl of Salisbury at the time wouldn't have wanted to manage his estate on a day-by-day basis. He'd leave it to his factor or to his other managers. But they would have to make a return to the Earl every 6 months or perhaps even every quarter. And if, let's say, there was a bad harvest due to the weather, perhaps excessive rainfall or excessive drought or excessive heat, or there was a really nasty storm that blew down a lot of trees in the woods owned by the Earl, then that manager would have to make a return, would have to say in those records why the takings, if you like, for that Earl's property were down this year. So that's one source of incidental, if you like, weather records we can have. The second category, seafarers. Now, they're fascinating, of course. The problem with seafarers, we, at the time, as you and your listeners probably realize, we relied very heavily on coastal shipping to move goods about and indeed to move people about as well. Smaller ships would not really want to turn out in something like a 30, 35 mile an hour wind, whereas the larger vessels would be quite happy to weather those storms. And it's sometimes quite difficult to work out how small a ship is or how large a ship is, because from those records, we can then tell how strong the winds on a particular day during a particular storm were. And a storm might cause lots of coastal shipping to head for shelter, whereas the larger ships wouldn't bother so much with that. And the third category, of course, is our old friends, the country clergy. They again they did later in the, what should we say, late 17th century onwards. Yes, they did start keeping day by day weather diaries, but at this stage, they were making notes, for instance, again, try and give you a real world example for the time. let's say there was an outbreak of what we would now know as influenza, and that caused a lot of mortality. But it was in the middle of a really harsh winter. They would have to make a record that they couldn't adequately bury people due to the fact that the ground was very frozen. So it's those sort of records that we're looking at, Cassidy, to fill in, to flesh out, if you like, our knowledge of the weather at the time.
If you'd like to dive deeper into the history of weather diaries and understand who it was that was writing these and what was in some of the ones from Shakespeare's lifetime, you can check out my full interview with Martin at CassidyCash.com/episode 250. I'll place a link to that below this video. Until next time, may your skies be clear, your plays be merry, and your forecasts accurate. Thank you for watching. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.